I'm Dr. Shoshana Garfield. Behind the camera is Dr. Sasha Mitrofanov, and welcome to Happy Families. And we're going to be doing pretty much what it says on the tin, bless you. And this is the outline of what we're going to do today. First, we're going to talk about what does a family environment that's happy mean? And what is it generally? And we're going to look at our own families and look at different areas that maybe have some room for improvement, or pat yourself on the back for places where it's really working very well. Looking at happiness, parent and child responsibilities, a big chunk on parenting strategies, which is probably a lot of meat, like stuff you can actually do, and parenting resources. Suffice to say that if you try a technique without making sure your foundations are in place, is a real structure for failure. So it's a whole package deal. Who we are a happy family, not being like American-y, smuggy sort of thing, but we work really hard to be happy. It takes work. And it takes work to maintain it, work to create it, work to keep it going, but it's happy work, because we know the loveliness that comes out of doing it. And we've hit upon very stable systems now in our family, and we are open to revising them regularly, which is also part of having a happy environment, having a bit of flexibility. We have a 9.5-year-old daughter, Alia, who has been very much helped by Potential Plus, an absolutely astonishing impact in our lives the organization has had. We have been contracted to revamp our school's well-being policy, partly because of the PhD in psychology, partly because I'm a happiness expert. And part of what makes me a happiness expert is, strangely enough, being a real expert in really huge off-the-scale traumas. So people who are suicidal, who have been tortured, massive disorders, this huge stuff that can barely speak about it. When you know what happiness is, when you really get it, you understand how to disentangle all the unhappinesses. So, what is a family environment to you? Oh, good thing I moved on. Not sure? Oh. Pardon?
Mom, dad, and the kids.
Mom, dad, etc. Because it could be mom and kids.
Oh yeah, it's also different
Where you live, with the who you live with.
Kids plus mom, dad, caregivers, extended family. And you said environment?
Left home.
Home. Wherever I lay my hat. Yes.
The environment suggests a wider context of relationships and other things going on. Little activities that are available, or I don't know how you begin to describe what goes into that.
Let's see what we got. The things that you can name will come under these categories. So we have a physical home. That's an actual physical environment. We have the people that are in it. That's the social bit. Wider context of relationships, so talking about addressing social here. You've also got mental and spiritual, and emotional. Emotional, of course, is about feelings, which is also about thinking, which we shall talk about in immense detail. Mental, more kind of intellect, the kind of things you talk about at home, like what books do you read, that sort of thing. And the S word. For some of you, spiritual is going to be something that is very much part of your daily life. For others, it's like, no, I'm a diehard atheist. What are you talking about, this spiritual thing? Higher meaning. Even if all you look at with spiritual is higher meaning, it's greater sense of purpose. Whether you believe in God or not, you've probably asked yourself, who am I and what am I here for? These are kind of like metaphysical issues, if you prefer. So physical environment. Study spaces. Are they public or private? Tidy, untidy, shared or owned privately? Ergonomic or not? Your rest spaces, your social spaces, Your doing spaces, what are they like? What do you use for distractions? The things that are listed there, TV, Xbox, Wii, can be things that either kind of bring people together or can really bring them apart too. Study objects and where they're placed, the sociology of placement. Physical things like food and drink. You know, what's your sugar policy? Do you have a sugar policy? Activities. It's almost a computer gaming versus sport. You know, a Wii is not a replacement for getting outside and working up a sweat. There's the emotional environment. And take a moment to think about what the typical emotions you have at home. And sometimes happiness.
Sadness.
It could be.
Extremes.
Extreme, so a lot of variety, flinging back and forth.
The whole spectrum, really.
There can also be a lot of mediocrity, a lot of kind of bubbling along, bumming along kind of stuff, yeah? And then again, thinking about the metaphysical, suffusing the moments with meaning, and like really bringing that attentiveness to your everyday. Cooking together, for instance. Or cooking on your own, that being that meditation for you. There's always room. Life attitudes that then wind up informing the kind of emotions that are at home. Is life always a struggle? Do you have to work really hard all the time? Or do things come easy? Those kinds of things. Boundaries and their enforcement. When's bedtime? When did you say bedtime was half an hour later? Do you have things on timers sometimes? Do you have things on timers all the time? Do you have all your food labels facing out? Can you be counted upon to keep your word? Which ultimately what boundaries are about, for part of it. Keeping your word, whether it's I will take you to such and such, or this is what needs to happen, or do you keep your word? How do you argue together? How do you resolve the inevitable conflict of having more than one ego under the same roof? Inevitable. What processes do you have to come back together? One therapist I had once talked about a relationship is about damage and repair, damage and repair. Unless you have that process of repair, it's just damage, 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 and damage. What gets unspoken? What doesn't get talked about? What's assumed for you at home? What are the feelings that flare up around homework? What is that like? What's it like for your family when you listen to television and radio? Do you deconstruct it? Do you talk about it? Do you move on? Like I need to? What do you speak to your children about? What do you talk about? Do you ask them about who they play with, who they spend time with? Do you ask about the teachers? Do you spend more time talking about the social? Or do you say, what did you learn? What's your focus? Because the questions you ask talk about your values and your attitudes. Does that make sense? You're always giving far more information than you realize. You're always revealing far more to yourself than you realize. So if you pay attention, it's so cool. Books. Do you talk about their books, your books, no books? Do you know what your kid's reading now? Which 8 books they may be reading now? Do you do board games together or computer games? Newspapers, magazines. Do you talk about the words you use? Do you talk about meanings of things? Do you talk about news events and what they mean kind of more globally or just what's happening more locally? What's your scale? More social environment. Got a Facebook logo up there, which is also very interesting, the social media stuff that can really suck people away from interacting and onto the computer to give little bullet points about lives instead of living it. You know what I think about Facebook. You can always give them more information. The parents, how many are present? We have a family constellation where there's daddy and mommy, but there's another daddy who's a shadow. He's absent because he's the biological father, but he has absented himself. So our family involves someone who never speaks and is not there. Who's there in your family, or who's not there but present? We also have a son who's not there because he passed on. So we have the two people in our family that aren't there. So it makes for very interesting conversations sometimes. Family members, can you trust them to do the kind of parenting that you want them to have? How do you negotiate that? Family friends, which are often more congruent for you. Radio, TV, internet, kind of thinking about what kind of relationships are on display and what do they mean? What are your children learning about how to relate to each other and to themselves from what they're learning? Talked about social media, school friends and play dates, that in person, no replacement for being in person and interacting right then and there. And spiritual environments. What's important to your family? That's what it comes down to. Values are what's important to you. And your identity. Are you Jewish? Are you Christian? Are you agnostics? Are you, I don't know. Are you middle class but don't want to admit it? Or upper class and don't want to admit it? Or working class and proud? These metaphysical questions that children ask, especially children that we have, and I'll ask it earlier than all the other children will ask. Who am I really? What am I here for? What's the purpose? Why are you here? And I know you're my mom, but why are you here? And we've put attitude to failure in the spiritual environment because of the nature of what failure means. And we'll be discussing more about that later. So I am now going to hand over. No, not this one, the later one. Yep, so I'm still doing this one. Okay. So exercise 1. Lucky to, should we do it individually or groups? Pairs or groups, because the room we can only do kind of, you have to find a way to negotiate the inadequate physical space and break down into groups that are comfortable for you. And to answer these questions for each of the 5 types, which I'll list up here.
They're on the slide.
Oh, they're on the slide, thank you. Physical, emotional, mental, social, and spiritual. What's working well? What ain't working? On a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate it? So you can either do it like a circle wheel, and that's 10, and you can see where different things are, like that, and then you kind of connect them together and you can see that actually that's a wonky wheel. Or you can just do your own little bar charts, or you can just do lists of numbers, whichever thing works for you. Okay? I invite you to talk amongst yourselves. So, what did you discover about yourselves and the people you've been speaking with?
It's very difficult.
What's difficult?
This whole exercise.
Because?
Because no one here, well, for most of us, there isn't someone else who can look in and say, yeah, this is the problem. And for us, we're living in it and not sure how to unpick what the problem area is.
Ah. Okay. Do you have a thought about that, Sasha? It looked like you did.
No, the following exercise will hopefully help to resolve that.
What he said.
Can I offer something else? It's not a resolution to that, but in speaking to the gentleman to my left, I realised as I set off, I thought, okay, physical. And I mentioned in the previous session, we have a very big, complex household because my 4 adult children still live in the house, and some of them have grandchildren, and it's chaos. But we thought what we would do is extend the kitchen. So we basically moved the back wall 9 metres down the bar, so that we have a very big space to cook, space to eat, space to sit. And I was just explaining how that physical change has had an impact on the emotional, mental, social and spiritual. It suddenly made space for everybody to do all those things. And so the interconnectedness of the concepts
was suddenly
We
apparent.
just said the same thing, almost exactly, because we've just moved house into a house that finally has a kitchen that is central and part of everybody's lives, and exactly the same transformation, and it's amazing.
But did the transformation surprise you?
Yes, because we just thought we'd made a space to sit down. I was saying, I would like to claim that we thought it was you.
What else are people discovering that you're willing to share?
Value what other people value. So, for me, having an amazing space is not that important.
And
It's
so
like,
what is?
my internal world.
Mm.
So, actually, it's really important to know what the rest of my family, whether it matters to them, even if it doesn't matter to me, that kind of thing.
And if your internal world is most important, how do you facilitate the loveliness of that internal world? So it's just to ask, but not to answer publicly, but just to ask. Okay, one more and then we're going to hand over.
It's about having, even though before the child is born, having the ideal and then accepting that actually you just have to accept good enough and what's good enough for yourself rather than what you thought you would like to achieve.
It's a very critical concept. There's a fellow called Bion, B-I-O-N, who talked about good enough parenting. Absolutely, good enough being a driving concept as well in the physical world. Absolutely. Okay. Wow. And was that not aware, that's not something people were aware of quite before to that extent? So that was a new insight.
I guess we haven't looked at it all together. You know, individually you think, oh, this is the emotion especially.
Okay. So that might get more revealed in the next exercise, and I am going to hand over to Dr. Mitrofanov.
Okay, hello everyone. So I would like to lead you through an exercise, and straight away disclaim that usually this exercise would take probably 20 minutes for just one way, and I'd like to do the demo, and plus for you to do it again in your pairs each way, so it's 3 times the exercise and fit it all within 20 minutes. So if you don't have quite enough time to complete, then I hope that at least you'll get the basic idea of how it works, so you can use it as a tool in your family and see for yourself if it's something that could be useful. And how it could be useful is, when we're in a situation when it's too close to our skin, and so we can kind of step aside and decide, okay, what's working, what's not working, then hopefully this exercise will help to bring new insights, new ideas, and to reflect on the situation, to bring new resources into that, so that to decide on certain adjustment to the course of action, to what's happening within your family environment. So this is the exercise which comes from the field of neurolinguistic programming. It's called neurological or logical levels, and it's like a pyramid. So we start with the environment. And so what I would suggest you to do when you're doing this exercise in pairs is to pick the most problematic area out of 5. So physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, social. Pick what's not working, and then have an idea, describe what's going on there. And then you'll be asking certain questions higher up the level, up this pyramid, all the way through behavior, capabilities, beliefs and values, identity and purpose, and then you'll be returning back from purpose back into the environment. And hopefully by the time that you're actually back to the environment, you'll have much clearer ideas about how you can adjust the behavior, or whether it's physical space, whether it is your attitudes, so that the environment changes in the way that would work more for your family. So I would like to give a short demo. Would you like to have a short demo? Yeah? Okay, so in this case I can ask for volunteer for 5 minutes demo and leading through this process here in front of everyone. Would anyone like to step forward? And again, you don't have to have a very clear idea of what's going on there, but just to know something is not quite working. Well, okay, I think it's first hand. Yeah, please, if you don't mind stepping forward. What's your name?
Ossie.
Ossie. Hi, Ossie. I'm Sasha.
Hi.
So, Ossie, what is the area, what is the environment that you would like to focus on here?
Emotional.
Emotional. And if you can literally in a couple of sentences describe what is your emotional environment like at home?
It's a very Aspergian family,
Mhm.
so sometimes the limits are crossed just too quickly and too invisibly, and that includes the adults as well as the children.
Okay, okay. And in this environment, what kind of things that you do? How do you interact? Or don't interact?
A mixture of shutting down into intense pedantry and exploding and flying off the handle.
Okay, okay, okay. And in this mixture, whether you're kind of exploding or pedantry, you said?
Yes.
Okay. So what kind of what are your strategies? What kind of skills and capability that you have? How you?
We try to step back from the explosions anyway. Try to step back from the explosions and provide a calm down space, and then go back and readdress. Deal with the source of the explosion before we... No, sorry. Deal with the explosion before we deal with the source of the explosion.
Okay.
And when going to the pedantry, I haven't got a solution.
Okay, okay, okay. So just to bring your attention that so far we are up to this level. So ask about what's the environment, then what do you do in that environment, what are your strategies that you employ, and then now we are up to the level of beliefs and values. So what is important for you in this context?
To prevent things getting to the point of no return, to the explosions and the distress, and if things do get to that point, to minimise the distress they cause, and the examples that are set, which then perpetuate the cycle.
So do you think that they inbuilt beliefs about how you operate or what's, you know, so what do you believe in that? That's my next question.
Actually understand the question.
Okay, in this case we would unpack it otherwise, but we don't have time for that. So you already explained what's important, so we address the level of values. So let's start level up. And so how do you perceive your role within this environment?
As a mediator.
As a mediator?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So that's the level of identity and stepping up. And what is your purpose as a mediator?
To try and bring things back to a stable, happy position when things have gone wrong.
Okay, and now looking from the highest level of the purpose of to bring things back into balance, how would you, is there anything else that's kind of you can expand your purpose or expand your role as a mediator?
I suppose my main role as a parent is to model the behaviour I want from my children.
Okay, so what we are doing, so now we are returning back, having explored what the purpose is, and in this case is to bring the family into balance. Now going back down from top level through the levels. So and so far what Ossie just said is that on top of this role of mediator, there's also your parents, and this is important for you to model for your children of how you want to operate there. Okay, and is there anything else that you would like to, how you'd like to expand your identity? So you're a mediator, you're a parent, is there anything else?
I'd like to be able to apply the solutions to myself as well, so that I don't lose my cool.
Okay, okay. And so going one level down, so in this case, what else becomes important for you in this context, apart from what you mentioned already before?
There are so many things to juggle, so many things to remember, so many different aspects of parenting and dealing with emotions that when things become hectic, it's difficult to remember what it was you wanted to achieve in the first place.
Okay, that sounds like a belief that there are so many different, and I'm not saying this is not true, but that there are so many elements, so many things to juggle. So having so many things to juggle, what's important for you about that process of
simplifying things?
Simplifying things. Okay, okay. And so in this case, we've expand level of beliefs and values. Let's go level down. So what kind of skills or strategies would you like to develop to be able to simplify?
Exactly what you're doing. Asking the right questions and breaking them down to the right level and going in the right order.
Okay, and so that's the skill, and obviously it's something that will develop over time. And so once you've got that skill of simplifying things and pushing things in the right order, what will you be able of doing? What will be your actions? How do you think your actions will change once you've got that ability?
I would hope, firstly, to be able to avert distress. When you can see, when I can see something's going wrong, to actually deal with it before it goes wrong.
Okay, so prevention.
Prevention, and then
Okay.
if things do go wrong, to deal with it in a way that doesn't cause other people, whether it's myself or another child, distress.
Anything else that you see changing in your behavior as you've developed the skill of simplifying things and pushing things in order?
Finding it easier to actually do these actions,
Okay.
and finding them more instinctive.
Okay, now going to the final level, again back to where we started, level of environments. How do you think that will all affect your emotional environments at home?
I think it'll be a happier environment with less discomfort about going to the extremes.
Great. Thank you, Ossie.
Thank you.
Okay, and so yeah, I understand this was a very quick demo, and it might still be not quite clear how to use this process, but I suggest you split please into pairs, and again about 7 minutes each way to do this exercise and see if it brings any new ideas, insights of what kind of skills would be useful to develop and how to go about it and how this will affect the environment. So please go ahead.
Again, I'm so sorry to interrupt this. As Sasha said, it usually takes 20 minutes each way. So if you do this again at home, with the depth and the time, you might find some really even more cool stuff coming out. So, what did you discover?
Trying to get a solution to our problems, basically.
Trying to get a solution?
Well, with this exercise, I think we just thought about it and how to get to a solution. What can I do to improve this?
So what I'm hearing you say is that you have more clarity on the problem.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah?
Identifying the issues, but don't necessarily have the answers.
Okay.
We struggled with the solutions. It was easy finding out what the problem was and where we wanted to be. The bit in between was a bit of a gap.
Okay, so I'm hearing this is a common theme for people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Realising how much I don't know about how to get where I want to be.
Mm. Okay.
We both discovered that a solution with the eldest child will resolve some issues with the younger child.
Ah. Interrelatedness.
So it could be something like space in the home. Give the older child more space, and then it keeps them away from not crowding the younger children, perhaps, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, yeah. Or the opposite, yeah. Yeah.
But same is the negotiating issues around space. And Ozzy?
That I'm so used to thinking about certain problems in a certain way with a certain attitude, that to be asked about them in a different way, asking me to think in a different way, is really quite shocking almost, and makes me think different thoughts.
Yes.
Oh,
Cool, isn't it?
It was wonderful watching that unfolding. That was great.
We're going to move on to kind of address these first two gaps. Like, I've got clarity, but like, okay, where do I go from here? Okay, and sociology of space, very important. Happiness and better study is going to include that. Happy children study better. They learn better, they remember better. Because happiness in and of itself promotes better focus, more creativity, energy, motivation, and there's a lessening or even an absence of fear, anxiety, and worry. Just a very quick little reminder of that, you know, we're all here in the role as parents. We're here at a conference for children with higher learning potential. Yeah, so what we do really impacts our kids very deeply in the ways that we're expecting in terms of intellectual achievement. Tech guy. So what is this happiness thing anyway? What makes you happy and what makes you unhappy? I'm just going to put a division on the board. Happy or unhappy, call it what you like. How about we'll start with happy then, actually. We'll start with happy.
Sense of achievement.
Pardon? Achievement.
Sense of achievement.
Making other people.
Okay. Sense of achievement, making, whoops, hold on a second. Making.
Friendship.
State of mind, friendship.
Meaning.
Heard the meaning.
Infection.
No, what I heard couldn't be what you said. I heard infection.
By other people's happiness.
Ah, okay.
It's infectious.
The flu's not funny.
What else makes you happy?
Feeling understood.
Sushi.
Did someone say sushi? Putting that down, man.
Shoshana, halfway.
Thank you. And what makes you unhappy?
Inconsiderate people.
That's Chinese for people.
Okay.
Conflict.
Disappointment.
Disappointment.
Yeah.
Injustice.
Injustice and being tired. Did I hear being tired?
Yeah.
Okay.
Say no when I really want to say yes.
And that's, I have to say no to more responses. You wanted to say no, but you said yes instead. So, does that work yet? Okay. Happiness is made, joy, peace, calm, kind of chilled out. Happiness researchers typically define happiness as the presence of good feeling, the absence of negative feeling, and meaning. They partly got it. They partly got it. And we're going to discover why. What they're talking about is thinking. Meaning comes from thinking. Feeling comes from our thoughts. And all these things are what we experience from our thinking about what we think about as unjust, what we think about as inconsiderate behavior. And we're going to talk a lot more about it. That's still not working because you still have it in your hand.
Sorry, could you just repeat what those 3 points about the happiness?
Sure. In terms of typical happiness research?
Yeah.
So, the presence of nice feeling, the absence of negative feeling, and meaning. Meaning is what distinguishes happiness from, like, being drunk or something. It has to have some kind of lovely, deeper meaning there as well. So, for instance, connecting with others. Part of making others happy is about connecting to others, and that connection being meaningful. So what it comes from, how where happiness comes from, is not the circumstance that we're thinking of, but the thinking about the circumstance. We're just sandwiching in a little layer. We understand that circumstance influences how we feel. There's recent research, for instance, by Rupert Sheldrake, who's actually been, not recent, he's been talking about it for 20 years, about fields and how infectious feelings can be because we're sitting in each other's energy fields. Morphogenetic energy fields, he calls it. New Science of Life, very interesting book. Good quality science. Not woo-woo at all, I promise. And let me see what the next point is here. Okay. Feelings and thoughts are kind of flip sides of the same coin. Feelings are the felt side of our thinking. However subconscious or even nonverbal that may be. You learn how to drive a car. Most of us drive a car sitting in this room. Your body knows what to do. Your body's having thoughts about how to move. That's subconscious or nonverbal thinking. We're used to thinking of subconscious thinking as kind of more like psychoanalytic, tell me about your childhood, what's in your dreams kind of stuff. It's far more than that. There's a corollary here that is guaranteed to transform your family dynamics when you really take this on board. And that is, we are, logically speaking, 100% responsible for 100% of our feelings, 100% of the time. Zero exceptions. I mean, absolutely zero. I'm going to use some extreme examples here. When my son died, I wasn't feeling grief because my son died. I was feeling grief because of my thinking at the time about my son's death. I spent 6 months on the couch after he died. I was absolutely in bits. As one might expect, it's a very normal sort of thing to happen. But I'm not on the couch now. I'm functional, I'm okay. I can think in a straight line most of the time. My thinking changed. I still love him just the same, but my thinking about his loss has changed. He's still dead. He's just as dead as he was the day after he died, as 6 years later. The same circumstance. Does that make sense? It was the most extreme thing I could possibly think of in a group of parents to give. It is never, ever, ever, ever the circumstance. We are therefore not victims of circumstance and certainly not our own thinking. Your children don't make you angry. It just looks like it. You make yourself angry with the meanings that you're making of what they did to trigger all that angry thinking. And your children don't make you peaceful either. This morning in the hotel room, I'm looking at my little girl sleeping. She looks so cute, and I took a little picture on my iPhone. But she wasn't making me feel peaceful and all warm and bubbly inside. It's my thinking about her that did that. And she's a gorgeous aide-de-memoire for my own happiness. Holding children responsible, saying, oh, you make me so angry when you do that, is so, can I use I'm going to use a naughty word anyway, back-ass words, okay? They cannot do that to you or for you. They're not responsible for your happiness. You hold yourself accountable and you teach them their accountability. So I can say to my daughter, I'm really making myself distressed over thinking about how late you're going to be to school this morning because you took half an hour to get yourself dressed. I know I'm doing it to myself, and you still have to get to school on time. Making the distinction between my feelings, the external stuff, taking my accountability, and not blaming her. Even if I do get irritated, which I do, at least
5 times a week.
We all fall off the happy wagon. It's about getting back up. And your children are responsible for their feelings. And holding them accountable to is absolutely critical. Your job as a parent? Guiding them, pointing them in the direction of their fulfillment. What is not your job as a parent? Not your job to make your kids happy. You can't do it. As there was something up here, or making others happy. I think a more accurate way of saying that would be fostering happiness in others would be more accurate and just as beautiful and much healthier. You can point people in the direction of their happiness. As you were having an earlier conversation about homework, we can be reasonable with our children, but if they don't want to listen to reason, they are going to block that reason out. You can only point people in directions. Nobody can do their thinking for you. You've got to do your thinking for you, and everyone else here has to do your own thinking for yourself. No one else can do it for you. Your kids' job? Be themselves. Every day something different. It means being happy, contributing, responsible, self-fulfilled, moral, functioning independent adults to the utmost of their abilities. Which includes sound thinking, which includes critical thinking. I always bang on about critical thinking. Reasoning ability, awareness and ability to defend against manipulation, like peer pressures, especially when they're teenagers. And emotional intelligence, being able to see inside, oops, I fell off my happy wagon, my thinking's wonky now, and the connecting back to that inner peace, that calm. What is not your children's job? To make you happy with their achievements or good behavior or compliance. Very, very different from being accountable. When Aliyah drew on the wall, she washed it off. She was accountable for that. Leading by positive example. According to attachment theory says that relationships are stored in procedural memory. Procedural memory is where learning, where physical skills are stored. You can't read a book about playing tennis and win Wimbledon. You can't read a book about driving a car and drive a car. You can't read a book about happy families and do happy families. It's about relationships, procedural memory. They learn through countless repetition, just like you did in learning how to drive a car. Oh yes, I forgot to ask for mobiles to be on silent. Thank you for reminding us all. It's not what you manage to pull out on occasion. The best way to teach your children to smoke cigarettes is to smoke cigarettes. Even if you quit once in a while. Be the best you can be. You are beholden to clean up your own junk. And I could spend half a day talking about this one point. That if you're having difficulties with your parenting, look at yourself first. Look at your history. Look at what patterns you have of relating. Where did they come from? Clean it up. If I didn't bother cleaning up what my mother taught me, boy, would Aaliyah be in trouble. Point them to their happiness by living your joy. I will share with you something extraordinarily inappropriate that Sasha has asked me not to do. I'm going to do it anyway. One of the things that I was reminded about in terms of social space, when I was watching Sasha draw up on the board, and I was drawn to what some people euphemistically call the tops of the legs. And so watching his butt, it was reminded me that that part of the social environment for children is for the parents to have their intimacy sorted in all ways. And that if parents focus too much on the children and children and children and on themselves individually, they need space to come together, whether that's the quiet, intimate space of the bedroom or wherever you want to do it when the kids aren't home, or whether that's when one parent gets a little Asperger and needs to kind of withdraw from space. Sasha's a little bit like that. He needs more time out. You know, we need to give ourselves and each other that space. When you organize yourself around facilitating your happiness, you make it easier for yourself and your children. And I must move on, apparently. Point them to their responsibility for their happiness by demonstrating yours daily. You need to be accountable, publicly accountable. They need to see you make your mistakes and deal with it healthily, rationally, with grace. even when you're not feeling graceful. I love this quote. I had this last year. Because of their size, parents may be difficult to discipline properly. So caveats here. Strategies are a means to an end. And that end must be in the genuine best interests of the child, or the separate best interests of the children, which can be different. And strategies only work if they come from a place of empathy and compassion. If you do it coldly, with the intent to control, good luck. You'll get hatred from your child at some point. If instead you discipline with warmth and acceptance, with no global judgment of who they are, but only on the behavior, you create intimacy, you create security, you create cooperation, even when you get initial resistance, especially when you make changes. One of the things about systems, I don't know if any of you have done any reading about systems, is that there's something called homeostasis. The system seeks equilibrium, seeks to be the same. So if something changes, the system pulls to get it back to the way it was. So if you're going to change the rules, that is going to be an uphill struggle or an extra effort involved until you reach the new homeostasis, the new equilibrium. So just to warn you, even the desired changes your children may want, they will resist in you, because that's just human behavior is what we do. It's systems. One absolutely awesome way of structuring your language is a nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg, he was a psychotherapist in Detroit. And Detroit, when he was growing up, was a pretty rough town. And he was really distressed at all the violence around, and he wanted to find a way to get people to talk to each other more. So we found a formula. You have a formula that you can practice with. And yes, the formula is awkward and clunky when you first start doing it. But when you combine it with realizing that your feelings come from your thinking, it can become very powerful. So, observation. I noticed you left your coat on the floor. Feeling. It bothers me to see the house untidy. Now, of course, embedded in that statement is a fallacy of logic, but never mind. You all see the fallacy of logic? Which is? It doesn't bother you seeing the house untidy. It's my thinking about the untidy house that bothers me. I really need to be able to walk through the house without stumbling over your stuff. Therefore, can you please hang up your coat? What needs to happen so you remember to hang your coat more? And you can shorten this when you do this often, like, Ollie, a coat! This is the utility of training, and also keeping your voice non-judgmental. If I said, Ollie, a coat! It's very different. Yeah, it's not just the words, it's the power behind it, what's driving it.
Why is it with the request stipulated in the future, what needs to happen for you to remember to hang your coat up in the future? Why not the now? Why not simply deal with it?
Well, there are different ways of phrasing it.
Yeah.
I think it's a very Jewish thing. What needs to happen for you to remember to hang up your coat? Again, it's not the words, it's what's behind it. And you can phrase your request in many, many different ways. And there are many different requests one can make. Do read the book, and there are trainings on it as well. It's really, really profound stuff. Problem solving. Talk about the child's needs amongst yourselves, with your friends, with your child as well. Some surprising things can emerge. When you talk about it with your child, do not permit blaming and shaming. That is not on the table. So before you have a conversation, you have to lay out the rules of the conversation. That's top part of doing boundaries. All these things interweave together. So we're going to try this. We're going to do something new. We're going to have a chat. We're going to see how it goes. And then afterwards, we're going to see what worked and what didn't work. So you have your debrief as well for the conversation. And these are the rules. Are there any rules you would like to add or change? And some are non-negotiable. No blaming either way, for instance. And work together, brainstorm together to find a mutually agreeable solution. So throwing out the coat next time you find it might be something the child suggests, but might not be something that you're on board with. You also decide on accountability and consequences. We're really big on really predefining accountability and consequences, really, really clear. So there's no question. You know what was going to happen. You even agreed to it, practically signed on the dotted line. Where's the question? If you want to change it, now's not the time. We have to have another meeting about it, so the consequence is still in effect. So we're also really big on family meetings. We have a lot of structure.
Should we give an example?
Sure.
We've got Nellie's school bag. We've got a laminated list of all the things she needs to remember to take from school. And because I pick her up later after school club, then she already needs to have all the things prepared. Your bag, your lunchbox, your bottle, all of this. And if she keeps me waiting there for 5 extra minutes picking all the stuff, on the other side of that laminated list, there are consequences. So she knows if she's not ready, then she will be unloading and reloading dishwasher the very next day, the very next evening. So now she's more often than not gets her stuff together before I come.
And it was her suggestion. That was her suggestion. I know, it is cute, isn't it? Empathy. Okay. I read this in a psychoanalytical way, actually, for a moment. Getting in touch with them, maybe going on for your inner child is what I put in my head. Going for the unresolved and still hurts stuff going on for you, as well as for the physical little one that you're dealing with, without getting absorbed or flooded or overwhelmed by their or your child feelings. Rather, get curious. Gosh, I wonder what happens that she doesn't do X, Y, and Z, or does A, B, C. I wonder. I really wonder. Just because I can't guess what thinking that is. Whenever possible, be appropriately compassionate and empathic. That's not to say, oh, there, oh, I'm so sorry all the time, because there's a lot of parenting books that'll tell you that kind of kids can get lost in empathy as well because they get stuck in the problem. It's always about moving on as well. But in expression of empathy, that could be done in many ways. Non-verbally, with the gaze, very important. Just a little fact, for children, the development of their prefrontal cortex is, in appropriate ways, is very much dependent on having appropriate empathic gaze a sufficient amount of time. That if children aren't looked at appropriately, their IQs come down. Fascinating, isn't it? There's something about being looked at and seen, understood. It's very profoundly physiological. Or verbal. I'm really sorry, honey. I'm really sorry. Or, you look distressed. Or, gosh, that sounds like it really hurts. Or, that sounds tough. Praise. Specific praise. The importance of it, you get better self-esteem, they think better of themselves, more willingness to cooperate and share, and the trap of the good boy. Oh, well done, good boy, good girl. That what you're doing in those times, that when you're saying good boy and good girl, you're making a global evaluation of the person based on their behavior in that one moment. So the child's self-esteem is always balancing like a plate on top of a pole on your assessment of whether they've been good or not, to see if they are good or not. And it's always good or not, like it's either really good or really bad. So it encourages very dichotomous thinking as well as that center of gravity being outside of themselves and a rather craven need for social approval that does not serve them in any way. And it's what most of us were raised with. I had bad girl a lot, but you know, the same kind of stuff as good girl. It's just as bad, just as destructive. So you have to use descriptive praise. Wow, it's really clean now. Or it used to take you, this is literal from our family, it used to take you 6 hours to clean your room. You just did it in half an hour. That was amazing. You really developed a skill. You could describe what you feel. Oh, it's so nice to be in here now. I can see the floor. It's awesome. I can walk to the bed. And sum up the behavior with a word. That's what I call being well prepared. You know, and they've got their book, she's got her book bag already. Well done, you are well prepared. 5 love languages. I love this stuff. How many of you have heard of Gary Chapman's work before? So a few, but not a lot. Okay, gifts, words of affirmation, acts of service, quality time, and physical touch. So gifts, they could be very little things. My daughter used to love rubber bands, so when we found them on the way home from school with the postman, I'd pick them up and then they'd offer them to her and stuff. So she'd get rubber bands, and that was my gift to her. For her, she felt love by receiving a thing that she could hold. And words of affirmation, it could be I love you. It could be your bum looks great in that. It could be well done, obviously not to your child. It could be I really appreciate you making dinner. Again, hint, hint, couples. Thank you for the tea. Hint to make me more teas. By the way, just as a very slight aside, there was some couples research done recently and family research done. The single most important factor that they found in terms of behavior in happy families was a habit of making tea for each other. It was actually the same in America, believe it or not, although it was more coffee. That little kind of everyday generosity, which could be considered either a gift or an act of service, and to which you use words of affirmation, you say thank you. And quality time, really spending time together, being together, building your intimacy. Quality time is about building intimacy, about connecting. And appropriate physical touch. Hugs and cuddles, or strokes, little things. I saw a movie once where the boy said, my parents touch each other a lot, and to which a social worker replied, so they don't touch you then. So there's a lot that gets seen and felt. If you have a mismatch, because I'm really into words of affirmation. My daughter's into gifts. If I didn't get that, she would get to being older and think I didn't love her. Those rubber bands bought me a lot. So you have to find your own dialect and think about each of the people in the family and how you may be the same or different. And it could be multiple things important for the both of you. Responsibility and authority. Rosabeth Moss-Cantor did a fantastic study, Men and Women of the Corporation. Responsibility without authority is phenomenally, incredibly disempowering and creates really unwanted, horrible behaviors like gossip, sabotage, theft. And now I was talking about the workplace. But that's also stuff that goes on. The same goes on at home. Get yourself ready, but without having the authority about how that's going to happen, that's tough. So let's talk about how we get ready in the morning. Let's all agree how we do that. They have to be age appropriate, of course, so I wouldn't put a kid in charge of their sugar load, but maybe which sugar bits that they have could be something that's more their choice. And with coaching, kids can make bigger decisions. And we know with our children that they tend to want to make more decisions faster than their global capacities can allow. So find something, negotiate with them to find something that's appropriate either within that or separate from that. Feeding the cat or something. The depth and breadth of potential involvement increases obviously with maturity, and vice versa. Sorry, that last point. I think of Spider-Man a lot today. It's Peter Parker from Mr. Peter Parks. With greater independence comes greater responsibility. Yeah, because the maturity is finding that inner power. Yeah, so with greater power comes greater responsibility.
Does greater authority come as well in the family dynamic?
Sometimes. It's actually out of the scope to answer appropriately. Sorry. We can talk afterwards. Inclusion in decision making, even bedtime. So agree how many, if we're very little children, agree how many books you're going to read before bed. And stick to it.
They always negotiate.
Yeah, but the negotiation time is in the family meeting, not at bedtime. So what you're doing is you're containing the negotiation space. Make sense? And there's a concept of natural consequences. You want to go to bed at 11, I understand that, but you still have to go to school the next day or get up the next day, and your body is going to give you that feedback, honey. How about we try it tonight and see how you feel when I wake you up in the morning? And if you're not bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in the morning, we're going to try 9:30, okay? And then the next morning, it's okay, 9:30 tonight, that was our agreement. Let the natural consequences speak to it as much as you can. It's always great to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not defer.
Check on children.
Pardon?
It's not me.
Yes, it's not me. Delegate, that's it. Delegate to nature. And again, get them involved with deciding about consequences.
You've actually shifted responsibility for the child.
Yeah. Authority. Not just responsibility, but it's okay, let's decide together as a team what's going to happen around this. There's a mutuality with that.
I have a query about the consequences. We do consequences at home. Generally works fine. You have to get undone when it comes to school, because there are no consequences at school. So if he doesn't do his work, doesn't achieve what he could, if he chose to, they give him a choice. How many spellings would you like to do this week? So he can choose to do 2 or he can do 20.
What we did is we did more homeschooling. The school became daycare, and then we, and then, yeah, and then she did her real learning in the evening. So right now she has a vocabulary book, and she's meant to put in 2 words a day. Now she's forgot her vocabulary book at school all week. So that means that she's got clocked up 2 words a day that she's going to have to spend an hour now looking up when she finally remembers to bring it home, because she agreed to do 2 words a day. And the natural consequence of that is that she's going to not want to spend an hour with it. So good, bring it home every day, sweetie. It's on your laminated list.
By laminator. They're very expensive, actually.
They're not. Rules apply to big people as well as little people. There are consequences for you as well, and sometimes the children can be involved in setting the consequences for the big people. And talking more about accountability. Honesty first. We're really big on honesty in our family. And avoiding accountability and being dishonest diminishes respect. So this is from her last year. Tell them the truth. If the child finds out the parents have been lying, they will be angry and treat you with less respect. That's my daughter figuring that and giving that little gem to you. Admitting mistakes does not diminish authority, but increases it, including the intimacy between you. To say, yep, I was wrong about that, honey. Just saying sorry isn't enough. It's a process. We call it teshuvah in Judaism, but feel free to take it on. Admit it, say you're sorry, think about it, make the changes, make up for it. Teshuvah drives a lot of what we do at home as well. It's just saying it really nowhere near enough. And accountability leads to reliability. Can count on you to be there and keep your word. Helping out at home. It's not helping you. Aliyah's doing the dishwasher to contribute to the home, not to do something, because it's mainly Sasha's work is in the kitchen, is his area of responsibility. Mine is more laundry, and we have a cleaner who helps out with everything else. By asking them to contribute, you're talking about community or participation rather than like keeping you sweet.
But didn't you have the dishwasher as a consequence?
She had it.
So she will do the dishwasher in any case?
No, it's a consequence. If she forgets things, she'll do the dishwasher and relieve Sasha of it because he's the one that picks her up from school.
Right. But then how does helping out at home, doing dishwasher, for example, be part of contributing at home if it is a consequence, if it is also a negative consequence?
It's not a negative consequence.
Well, it is, because she hasn't done what she has to do, so the consequence is to do something she doesn't want to do.
It's not negative. It's saying, okay, I wasn't pulling my weight over here, I'm going to go make up for it by pulling my weight somewhere else. I can't go back in time and pack my bag when I promised I would, so because I broke my promise, I'm going to make up for it by doing something else. That's a positive act.
So if after supper you ask her to unload the dishwasher, she won't come back and say, but Mum, I brought my books home.
No, it's the deal. We make deals.
But
Stick to our word.
It's her day job, though. So no, it's doing something in addition to whatever her responsibilities. So it's not her normal job.
Yeah. Her normal job is keeping her room tidy. That's all we ask of her. And, you know, just keeping her things around the house neatly. That she has a space where she puts all her homework stuff and she puts her shoes in her coat. She's just responsible for her stuff. That's her job. Everything else is contributing. If it's framed that way, then yes. If it's not framed that way, then no. Because where circumstance doesn't have inherent meaning. We create it. So the meaning we've created over circumstances is a positive one. Even if she's grumpy about it, overall, it has a positive meaning because she knows she's contributing. And we thank her for doing it. We're just like, that's what you're supposed to do. Ugh. You know, it's, yeah, thank you, honey, you kept your word. That was fantastic.
Can just add on the dishwasher, why it is a consequence, not a punishment. Let's say if I waited for her 5 minutes, she spent 5 minutes of my time unnecessarily, and it would take me 5 minutes to do the dishwasher. Yeah. For her it would take an hour to do the dishwasher, but
no,
it's
not that long, but
not that long. She learned to do it fast now. But it's natural exchange.
Yeah. Cause and effect.
Yeah.
Might I also add, she's learning what is, I hope, a life skill.
Unloading a dishwasher.
And reloading. There's an art to it, you know? So it's age appropriate. You know, they make their beds not from age 1, but a little later. Unscrumpling their socks, they can do very early. How many of you do laundry and have to unscrumple socks? Don't do it. That's your kid's responsibility. Don't wash the socks if they are scrumpled. Natural consequence, no socks. It's okay. Or you ask them to do it later, and it goes in next week's wash or next 2 days' wash, or however many kids you have, depending on your frequency. Boundaries. Oh, again, these are all so interrelated. Consequences have to do with boundaries, accountability with boundaries, the speaking about what there's boundary on what's appropriate to say or not, the love languages, and in terms of the boundaries on, you know, how big the gifts are, or what kind of praise you give, and what kind of physical touch. Boundaries thread through everything that we've been speaking about. And again, from Alea, don't give them whatever they want, or they will get too used to having everything that they want and have terrible tantrums, and then you'll have to pay extra for the babysitter. Okay. There's some work in here from a guy called Robert Cialdini, who wrote a book called Influence. Inconsistent holding of boundaries actually triggers addictively pushing back behavior in human beings. And like Dr. Seuss says, a person's a person no matter how small. So when you are inconsistent with your boundaries, you are actually triggering deeply wired behavior that we see in many, many mammals of pushing back on boundaries. So beware inconsistent boundaries.
In a negative way, because pushing boundaries could be positive.
Yes,
you're meaning pushing against boundaries in a negative way.
Yes, thank you very much. Like bedtime boundaries. Yeah. Or homework boundaries. Or chore boundaries. Video game programmers use random rewards. Because if... thinking about rats. If a rat presses a lever to get food, and it always gets the food, it will eat a normal amount of food that's healthy for the rat. If, however, sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't get the food, you have overweight rats. They just keep on pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. Yeah? Video game programmers know this, so they program in random rewards into the video games. Like, sometimes you turn this corner, you get a power pack, and sometimes you don't. They just show up randomly. It's literally programmed in. So when you inconsistently hold boundaries, what you are in fact doing is giving random rewards for unwanted behavior, which generates more of the behavior you do not want. This is very, very straightforward cognitive behavioral sorts of information that is really important for you to know about. Also, having a privilege and then taking it away is absolutely anathema to us. Again, Cialdini gave the example of the USSR when perestroika and things falling apart. And give a little bit and it's like, boundaries have to be known in advance. You can't say all of a sudden, go, right, there's the boundary and just slammed into it, you're going to get punished. It's like, I was going to say, that's a head messing upping thing to do. I'd use the F word, but I'm not allowed. Exceptions need to be explained, and in explaining the exception, you create your own rules over what the exceptions are. So I'll say you can stay up late tonight because it's New Year's Eve. So there's a rule about New Year's Eve being okay not to have a bedtime. But that doesn't undermine bedtime, because you've given the explanation. It's not random, it's just pointed out to the child. Boundaries really are an art. And it takes a lot to be aware of them as well. Art of listening, allowing, responding, engaging, boundary holding, bending, reforming, negotiating with each other, co-negotiating. Remember, your parenting is systemic. It's not just a collection, a hodgepodge of techniques. It's held together by your care and your intentions and your thinking. So be conscious and deliberate in your leadership. You lead by example, whether you like that fact or not. And you lead by example, whether you like what you're leading them to or not. Again, with the smoking. Oh my God, did I finish on time? I've got 10 minutes, so we can do questions. We had more slides than before as well, and a bigger slides. Oh, that was so cool. Okay, so questions. Let me go through the resources. There's a lot of books here, and also the link where you'll see this video on, so you can see it again if you wish, and a whole list of books. And to arrange a consultation or to have me come and speak, you've got my contact details. Yes, that was the end. Wow. Okay. So.
I'm still struggling with the consequences issue. You say that participating, contributing in the household chores is not doing it to help mum or dad, it is not to make me happy, it's just because this is what being a family is. I have no issue with that. We try to have that attitude. But if a consequence of doing something, of breaking an agreement, is to do a household chore, doesn't that change what that household chore represents? If consequence of being out late is to unload the dishwasher, why then should she unload the dishwasher when she's not been out late? If it's just been supper and you say, Alia,
well, that's what you've got negotiated. When she gets a bit older, and it comes time for her to take on more around the house, we'll be renegotiating consequences.
Oh, I see. Right, okay, I follow, because for us, our younger children, younger than your daughters, unload the dishwasher, therefore it's...
So it'll be something else for your family.
Right, I follow.
Something that's a gift to the house.
So you don't actually have to do it at other times?
No, other times I do. Other times
yeah, other rest of the time he does it.
All the time, and the only time that she does it is when it is a consequence of something else.
Yeah. And her way of seeing, if I understand what you're saying, her way of seeing that is basically by her not being ready, which was her responsibility,
yeah.
She's let you down.
Yes.
So to make up for that, she's going to take on another responsibility that happens to be yours.
Mine. Yes.
Basically as a swap.
Yes.
I didn't do this one, so I'll do this one and we'll be even.
Yeah.
And there's doing repair in the relationship.
Yeah. But negotiated so everybody knows what the ground rules are.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between punishment and consequences, especially natural consequences. Punishment is power imposed. It's getting kids to regret what they did by taking joy out of their lives. And Marshall Rosenberg, what Marshall Rosenberg says is, you can't really make kids not want to do stuff. What you can do is make them regret that they did stuff. And then what they can do is make you regret that you made them regret it. That's punishment. Yes?
Where do you start with something that's so embedded that we just did not put the rules in place?
Family meetings. Family meetings. Okay, I've noticed that we have no rules about this, or the rules are really wonky and don't work. Let's have a meeting about this and talk about this. And Steve, again, I recommend Stephen Covey's book very, very much. He talks about before you have a meeting on rules, Talk about your family values together. What's important to us as a family? So for us, honesty is up there. Being persistent and, you know, keeping at something are things that are important to us. Keeping our word. So, you know, what's important, you know, for you as a family? Talk about that first, so you have that. Laminate it and put it on the fridge if you need to. Make it explicit. If things have been happening that don't work, make it explicit that it's not been working, and then find a way together to make it work and tweak it. So it's kind of like do something different. Mm-hmm.
We've got a family rules thing from Staples station, and we all wrote up and agreed what the family rules were going to be. And we came down one day, and my daughter had added a rule, which was if you have your first in to the special K red berries, don't pickle the red berries out.
And so part of that is, it's very, very sweet, but part of what she's saying is that I don't feel yet empowered enough to kind of bring this up verbally, but I have a space where I can write it down. So then reinforce that by bringing it to a family meeting and say, we're not trying to find out who picked all the red bits out of the special K, and saying this is a really fair request. And as a family, we're committing to this. Is that okay? And so then you really empower her even further. Any other questions? I've given you this is really not easy stuff. Easily said, not as easily done. Simple to say, but living your integrity is a lifelong task. And ultimately, we're here because we love our kids. Love is a verb, not like an internal attitude. So to give a very stark difference, Aaliyah's bio dad says I love you, honey, he said the last missive, but he deleted all of her postings on his Facebook page begging him to have her over for a visit. That's not doing love. Love is a verb, yeah? So you love your kids, and you do love in different ways. And so how can you do your love for your children more cleanly, more purely, more congruent with your values and what you want to be in the world and what you want them to learn about the world?
This reminds me of some videos I've been watching. Have you come across Danny Silk?
No.
He's produced a book and a set of videos called Loving Our Kids on Purpose.
Oh.
And everything he says completely resonates with what you've been talking about.
I'm really glad. Thank you for that confirmation. So Daniel Silk is another recommendation for you as a resource.
Can I just add something that I've been coming to your talks for a little while now, and one of the things I think I really took away from some of my early engagement was this business of trusting the children. So if you don't know what to do and you haven't really got any bright ideas, you know, asking the children what they think is absolutely amazing.
And it's also designed instead of tonight.
Because I've not had anything unhelpful, unconstructive, or impossible to do out of that strategy. So,
that's lovely. Thank you very much. And that is a lovely place to pause the workshop and pause the work and the workshop, but pause the work. Please do write out the evaluations. Love to hear what you've got to say. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.